Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, the Google Forms Quiz. Thanks for joining me. I know this is a really nice afternoon and there's a lot of things to do outside, so I appreciate you spending an hour with me learning about Google Forms and using it for quizzes. My name is Jen Sangiacomo. I am the Instructional Technology Integration Specialist at the Cohoes City School District. Used to be a social studies teacher, so that's my background. Please feel free to use the information on the screen here so that you can connect with me during and after the webinar. All of the information that you're going to need for this session can be found at these links. They're the same links, but the bit.ly one's a little bit cleaner for you. And that is bit.ly CCSD005. If for some reason bit.ly is blocked for you, then I did put the full link there. I'll leave it up for a few seconds, but you can pause the live feed if you need to type that in. You'll also notice under the YouTube video, there is a link to the live chat doc as well as the session resource page. And when you click on this link, it's going to, or enter it, it's going to take you to the Cohoes EdTech website, and there you'll be able to find this webinar as well as any others that I've done before. And if you have time later, definitely feel free to explore the site and see what other resources are available. Before we begin, I do want to point out a few resources for you on the site. After the live webinar ends, the YouTube video that you see here will become the recorded version of this session, so you'll be able to access it if you need. And below the live video, you're going to see links to the slideshow for this session, as well as other resources that will help you to explore the Google Forms quizzes more in depth after the webinar ends. A little bit further down, you'll see a live session chat document. So if you are watching this webinar live today, please open up that Google document now. And if you could, go ahead and say hello to everyone. Thanks to everyone who emailed me back and let me know what you were teaching and where you're from. But if you want to just let everyone know what you teach and what your background is, that'd be great. If you're taking this course for CTLE credit or PD credit through My Learning Plan, then this chat document is going to be used to measure your participation throughout today's webinar. And as an added benefit, it's a nice way that we can all communicate during today's session. So if you do have questions, and if you have an idea, a tip, or a resource that you'd like to share, go ahead and type that in there. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on this document throughout the session, but by all means, if you see a question in there and you feel like you have the answer or something to add, definitely go ahead and help each other out. When the session ends, anything that I didn't get to answer during the session, I will make sure that I add resources and answer questions as needed. Let's see, in order for you to earn a certificate, besides participating in that live chat document, during the session, I'm going to be asking you to take a sample Google Forms quiz. Don't worry, you're not going to be graded on it. It's just for you to see how things look on the student end, and so that I can then use your responses to demonstrate how to go about grading the quiz. And then I'll share that link when the time comes. And finally, you will need to complete the evaluation for this course through mylearningplan.com when the webinar ends. So, all right, I think we're ready to get into it. This is obviously going to be a session dedicated to the quiz feature of Google Forms. We'll start with a brief overview of the uses and the benefits of forms, and then we'll get to the meat of the session. You'll learn how to create, configure, distribute, and score your Google Forms quiz. And the session assumes that you have at least a little bit of experience with Google Forms, but if you're a first timer, don't worry, you'll find that Google Forms is very user-friendly. I see Matt's. Hi, Matt. And hi, Amanda. I see you guys checked in. And again, if you haven't opened a chat doc yet, you'll see the link below the video on YouTube. All right, so let's start with the basics. Google Forms is a Google app, and the main goal is to help you with data collection. Chances are you've probably responded to a Google form if you haven't made your own at some point. A lot of educators are using forms for surveying students, collecting parent information, things like that. It's one of the more versatile Google apps, and as you can see on this slide, teachers are using forms for so many different purposes. And today, we're just here to focus on using forms for assessments. So why would you choose to use Google Forms for assessments? I mean, there's so many reasons that it makes sense. And primarily, a lot of states, they're moving toward online standardized tests, even at the elementary level. So obviously, it's a really good way to prepare your students for these tests, letting them actually practice taking online tests. Second, Google Forms is accessible. And what I mean by that is it's very easy for you to distribute a Google Forms assessment to students, whether you're going to send it through an email or post a link. It's also easy for students to access a Google Forms quiz. They can take it on any device as long as there's an internet connection. And so that means that you're going to save some time not handing out papers and not collecting papers. And furthermore, if you have students that do have IEPs, because they're taking a Google Forms quiz online, that will allow them to use assistive technology when they're taking the Google Form quiz. At Cohoes, we have read and write for the district, so students would be able to utilize voice typing to type their responses. They'd be able to have the questions read to them or the directions read to them. And obviously, if you're not a special ed teacher or just regular classroom teacher, and you should probably consult with the special ed teacher just to make sure. But sometimes a student might actually be able to use their accommodations independently, which is pretty huge because a lot of kids don't use their accommodations, especially at the upper levels, because they're embarrassed to leave the room. All right, this one kind of speaks for itself, but the benefit of being paperless, it's not just that it's good for the environment and the school budget. Because it's paperless, it's also really good for you because you'll be saving time. You're not going to be using your free periods to go to the copier, which probably means you're not going to be dealing with paper jams. And because it is paperless, if you do make a mistake, it's not going to be a big ordeal. There's been some times that I can recall where I've run off 125 copies of a unit test, and then I realized that there was a major typo or I forgot to include something like an answer choice or a graphic that the students would need to be able to access to answer the question. And there's even been times when I mismarked the Scantron answer key, and then I put the entire class's answer sheets through the machine. So if you've ever done this before, you know that fixing a mistake like this can be a major hassle. But if you make a mistake in your Google form, it's really no problem. You just edit your form because Forms is a living document, essentially. Any changes that you make in a Google form, they're applied instantly with really no effort. Also, a Google form and online test, sure, it's probably more fun for the student. Most people don't say pen and paper tests are fun. With Google Forms, you can put in multimedia content, videos, graphics. You can even give kids the option to upload content that they create. And then this is the main reason that you probably all decided to join me today. The fact that Google Forms has the functionality to grade student responses for you is going to allow you to reclaim some serious time in your week. You're not going to be taking tests home to grade or worrying about piles of paper on your desk. Even if your assessment does include some extended response questions, grading those items couldn't be easier, and I'll show you that later in the session. And then this kind of goes hand in hand with automatic grading. Students are going to get quicker feedback. And studies show that the quicker that feedback is received, the more effective it is. Depending on your class sizes, it can take some time to grade and return papers. And by the time you finally get around to it, the students have lost interest. All those thoughtful comments that you wrote on their paper, now they're probably contained in a crumpled ball that's at the bottom of a backpack or a trash can. And as soon as the student does submit a Google form, it's going to be possible for the student to view their score and the feedback that you set for them. So that's really nice for the student as well. And then last, as student responses are submitted, item analysis is generated automatically for you. Google Forms creates a visual summary of the data, and it's priceless. It's like having a teacher's assistant, basically. The summary shows you the average class score, how the grades are distributed, and it identifies for you the most missed questions. And it makes it really easy for you to see where your students are struggling and identify the content that needs some reteaching. All right, so I think that we're ready to jump in and start creating. I'm going to walk you through the process of turning a form into a quiz, sending that quiz out, and then viewing the responses. It's up to you whether you'd like to be a spectator and you just want to observe the process, or if you want to be a little bit more hands-on and you want to build a quiz along with me on your own device. Remember, this webinar, it's being recorded, so you'll be able to revisit it on the session page as needed in the future. And for those of you unfamiliar with forms, there are a couple ways to create a new form. You can either go to forms.google.com, and then you have an option to press a blank form. But I'm going to go and head over to my Google Drive. And within Drive, just to make a form, you just press New. And it is hidden down here at the bottom under the option More. And Google Forms does have some nice templates, but we're just going to do a blank form. At any point, if I am going too fast or you need to see something again or just have a question about something that I just showed, use the chat document to communicate that to me. All right, so now that I've started a new form, the first thing that I would do would be to title it. So I'll just call this the Google Forms quiz. And yours could be anything that you really wanted. And it's also helpful to click on the title. So up in the top left, you'll see where it says Untitled Form. If you click there, it'll automatically name it whatever you titled your form. And just so you know, these do not need to match. So I could say this is going to be 2018 Google Forms quiz, just so that I know what it is. The description is optional. This might be, you might use this space to include some directions for students that are taking the quiz. And just some basics. You'll see some icons up here. We're not going to get into add-ons today. That's a little bit more of an advanced feature. The color palette would be where you would select a background color. You can pick a color. You can also pick a theme or upload your own if you'd like. Well, one recommendation is to pick a bright color for your Google form. And it doesn't matter what the background color really is, but if you are administering an assessment in class and you're worried about students opening up another tab and looking up answers, if you do pick a bright color, if a student does navigate to another tab, it would be really easy for you to see that. And we could get into the topic of cheating here, but my stance on it is that kids cheat on paper assessments too. Unfortunately, the opportunity to cheat, it's always there regardless of the medium. So as we go through today, we'll discuss some strategies to reduce instances of it. And if it's a concern for you, on the session resources page, there's an article about cheating on online assessments that you might want to check out. So one last thing before we add some questions, you'll want to establish the settings of your form. And you can always update the settings after you make your form, but I think it's best to do that first. So to customize those, you want to click on this gear or sprocket icon next to the send button. And when you open that, you'll see 3 tabs. The first tab is where you set the basic permissions and the rules for access. And again, these are going to be up to you in your situation. If you choose collect email addresses, it will ask people to provide their email address. If I checked this here and I left it to restrict to Cohoes City school users, it would automatically take their email address in without the student having to enter it. But I'll leave this one blank. I'll also leave this one blank. Now, if you're using this within a Gmail account and not a school education account for Google, you will not see this option restrict to Cohoes City school users. You will see limit to 1 response, and that would be useful if you wanted to, again, limit how many times that the student could take the form. So if it's like a homework assignment, go ahead and let them, try it. If it's a review activity, they can try it unlimited amount of time. But if it's an in-class assessment, it's probably a one-shot deal. You would check to limit them to 1 response. But I'll do this. Collect email address, limit to 1 response. I usually do not check these because I would go over the quiz or the test with the student afterward. Presentation tab is pretty straightforward. I usually would only adjust the confirmation message here. That's the message the students would get after they submit the form. Additionally, if you did check the shuffle question order, that would put the questions in a different order for you. So again, if you're worried about students sitting next to each other and cheating, that would kind of eradicate that because students would be seeing different questions. Now, if you do have students with IEPs, I would not check that because they're going to have their test read to them, and the consultants aren't going to be too happy with you if the questions are not in order. And I'm sure the SPED teachers out there would agree with that. Right, and then this is the tab where you're going to flip the switch and you're going to turn your form into a quiz. So you see the toggle slider right here. Just click over to the other side, and then you're going to see some different options come up. The first one is, when do you want to release the grade? Again, up to you. Immediately after, that option is really good if there's a homework assignment or you're doing a review activity. It's also really good if it's just a multiple choice type assessment. Keep in mind, if you do choose that option, if you had an extended response question, we'll talk about this later, but those questions are awarded 0 points until you manually review them and assign them points. So if you do choose that option, I would let the students know that the score they see when they submit their quiz is pending review, and you can remind them of that at the confirmation message. And so you'll see that later too. You also have the option to do it later after manual review. That would be great for an in-class assessment or quiz where you wouldn't want students to see what the correct answers are until after all the students have taken it. Then you also have to decide, what do you want students to see when they view their score? And I usually would just keep all of these selected, but each situation is going to be different. I'm going to save that. And then we're back to our form. And before we start adding questions, let's talk about the type of questions that you can ask and then the ones that can be auto-graded. So this was the first question right here. And in this area, this is where you select the question type. And these three right here, multiple choice checkboxes and drop-down, we'll discuss those a little bit later. These are the ones where you can set the answer and the Google form will grade it for you. So you could administer a quiz and it could grade it, and you wouldn't really have to look at it or do anything after the fact except to see what the kids got. Short answer is also eligible for auto grade. This is actually a new feature. It wasn't, if I did this webinar at this time last year, that would not be available. Think for short answer, like a fill in the blank type question, or a short answer with like a 1 or a 2-word response. If you get much longer than that, I would not do an auto grade on that one. And then the ones that would need to be graded by hand, that would be paragraph, which would be your like longer extended response type questions. File upload, which is where students can attach their work. Maybe it might be a picture, a drawing, a screenshot or something. Date and time, what year was the, or what date was Independence Day, or if you're a Spanish teacher, son las dos is what time, and they could enter in a time. And then these three right here, linear scale can be graded, but not auto-graded. And these two are interesting because when I planned out this webinar, it wasn't possible to grade these two types of questions. And depending on what Google account you're using today, it is and it isn't. So I'm in my Kahoot.org Google account. These options for multiple choice grid and checkbox, I cannot grade them. But if you're in a Gmail account, these are gradable. Last week, Google just made an update to Google Forms. And just to kind of demo multiple choice grid and checkbox grid, this is what those type of questions look like. This would be really good for English, which one's a noun, a verb, an adjective, for the health teachers, what ingredients are in each food, or symptoms of a disease. It's a good way to ask a lot of questions, but ask it within one question. So today we're not going to talk about that because I can't demo that in my education account, but that is an option for you to look at. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some questions and then show you how I would go about configuring my form to grade my quiz. And to speed this up a little bit, I've already typed out some questions in a document so that I can just copy and paste. And that's a pretty nice feature as well, being able to transfer items, because chances are you already have assessments saved on your computer and you don't want to have to totally recreate the wheel. So I'm going to come here to my first question, and it's going to be a multiple choice. If you don't know, when you highlight text, Control-C copies it, and Control-V pastes it. And for this one, it was already set to multiple choice, so I don't need to go ahead and change this. There isn't much of a difference between multiple choice and drop-down. They both allow for only one answer to be chosen. The only reason that you might elect to use a drop-down instead of a multiple choice would be if you had a question that had a lot of answer choices. This would help your form to look cleaner, and it wouldn't take the question wouldn't take up as much space. All right, so just like I can get rid of that, I can copy and paste the question. I can also copy and paste the answers. And Google Forms can tell where there's a line break, so I don't need to paste each choice in individually. You can also have images. So if you can see, if I hover over the answer choice, I have an option to put an image in. So I can have an image in my question. I can also have an image in my answer. So I'll show you that as well. So say, which one is the Google Forms logo? And then for option 1, I would click on this image, and I can insert image choices. I can upload from the computer, I can search Google for one, but I actually already have these in my Drive, so I'll just attach them right from Drive. And I'm not going to do all 4 choices just for the sake of time, but just to show you how you'd go about doing it. All right. And you can, again, also put an image in the question as well. So if you're a science teacher and you want to ask students to identify parts of the cell, or you're a social studies teacher and you want students to identify an artifact or a part of the world, this is a really nice feature. You can also insert a video before a question. So to do this, you click on the video option, and Forms integrates with YouTube. So you can either search YouTube right from there, or you can add a link to a YouTube video. I'm just going to grab a link I already have saved. It's just like a fun little video. It's not really related to anything. And then you would add a question underneath the video. Say, what type of dunk is this? And then I add my options. Reverse jam. Oops, how about I spell that right? Alley-oop. 60, and you can add more, or you can stop at 3. You don't need to have 4. And if you want to change up the answer choices, you can just drag them in any order. And actually, before we move on, let me just show you what that looks like to a student. This icon here lets you preview your form. So you can see them. This looks pretty nice. This is what we have so far. And I think this is a huge advantage over taking a paper test or a quiz. Being able to add multimedia definitely enhances the test-taking experience. Plus, using the video feature makes it a really useful tool for independent review, or if you want to do flipped learning with your class. Let me go back to my first question. And notice that this is not marked required. In fact, none of the questions that I've done so far are. That means that when somebody takes this quiz, they're going to be able to submit it without answering all the questions. And usually you'd want to make sure that this couldn't happen. So what I would do is mark it required by just toggling that slider over to the right. Okay. Doing this for each question, though, might get tedious, and then there's a chance that I might forget to do this for all the questions. Over here next to the send button, these 3 vertical dots, this is a menu of options. And at the bottom, you'll see preferences. And this gives you the option to automatically make all of your questions required. If you wanted to, you could also specify a point value for your quiz. So for each question, every question is automatically going to be worth 10 points. I'm not going to do that because chances are you might have quizzes and tests that are worth different values. So we'll leave that one, but we'll keep this one. So now any other question I add will automatically be marked required. Unfortunately, anything I've already added, I'm going to have to go and mark required. All right, so now that I've done that, you'll notice if I add a new question, it's marked required automatically. All right, and also next to this required button, just to give you a little tour again, I apologize if you already know this, but for those of you who don't, just letting you know the features that exist. This menu of options allows you to add a description. So if you wanted to leave a hint for a student, or if you wanted to give some additional directions, you could definitely use the description option. And there's also a shuffle option order. So if you wanted the answers to appear in a different order, random order, you could do that as well. Again, not recommended if for students that are having their tests read. All right, so at this point, I've added 3 questions, and you're probably wondering, how is Google Forms going to score this for me? All I have to do is let Google Forms know what the correct answer is and how many points that the question is worth. So for each question in the bottom left, you'll see an option for answer key. And when I click on that, it takes me out of edit mode. And the first thing that I will do is say, how many points is the question worth? I'll say this one's worth 10. And then I select the correct answer. Now, if I wanted to, I actually could select 2 because I might think my students might pick surveys. But really this one, I am looking just for a primary function. And the benefit of selecting 2 is that the students don't have to select 2, but they would get credit for picking either one. You'll also see that there is a place to add answer feedback. This is optional. When I open up answer feedback, you're allowed to add feedback for all the incorrect answers. Okay, it's a group. You can't do it, for each individual incorrect answer, but all the incorrect answers as a whole. And then you can also leave feedback for the correct answers, like nice job. And you can attach a link. So if students got the question wrong, you could attach a link to a YouTube video or class material so that they could review the information on their own. Right? And it's really a nice feature for leaving general feedback. All the students are going to receive whatever feedback that you've customized for the question. And it might take you a little time to type in a comment or attach a link for each question, but it's a lot more efficient than writing the same feedback over and over again on students' papers. It's like doing a really good job for one student's paper and then applying to everyone's. My suggestion with this is to just start small and try adding feedback for the questions that you would anticipate your students struggling the most with. I'm going to cancel out here. All right, so let me go and add for question 2. Let me go to my answer key. And here, this one is right. Specify my points. And then I'll come down to this one. Answer key is alley-oop. And it's 10 points. If I want to go back to editing this question, I would get out of the answer key mode by clicking Edit Question. All right, still want to add a few more question types so you can see what they are, but the process is more or less the same. And again, to add a question, you would press on this plus button on the right side. And my next question is going to be a checkbox question. So I will hit Control V to paste that in there. And notice I do not need to change the question type. Google Forms uses machine learning, so it's actually recognizing that this would be the best question type to use. All right, and again, I am asking students to pick more than one answer, and that's the main difference between a checkbox and a multiple choice. In a multiple choice, they're only allowed to pick one answer choice, but a checkbox, they can pick as many of the answer choices as they want. So also, let me get the answer choices in there as well. And then I'll go to my answer key. And in this case, would be surveys and assessments. All right, and let's see if there's anything else you need to know about this. Oh, it's very important for you to know that since you're picking two answers here, so will students. If the student picks only one, or if they pick one correct and one incorrect, the entire question is going to be marked wrong. But don't worry about that. You always can override the score later, and I'll definitely show you how to do that. One pretty cool feature of Forms that's going to help you reduce the need for you to do this is called response validation. So if I go back into my edit mode and I click on this menu here, you're not going to see this for multiple choice and drop-down type questions, but for this type of question and others, in the menu, you'll see a response validation. So what that would do is that allows me to specify that I want students to pick exactly two, not one, not three, not four. And if they don't, I can put in a custom message. You must make two selections. So let's see what that looks like. All right, scroll down. So if I just pick one, it tells me I have to make two. If I pick two, I'm good. If I pick three, it gives me a little warning to only pick two. So again, pretty cool feature. All right, I'll quickly do two more question types, and then I'll have you take the sample quiz. All right, and that question type, I'm going to go with a short answer. Now this Google Forms will recognize as a multiple choice because this could definitely be a multiple choice. Let's say I'm doing it as a kind of like a fill in the blank type question, and I want my students to answer Google Forms. So I change my question type to short answer. And then in my answer key, I would put all possible correct answers. And it is unfortunately case sensitive. So I might want to put in any derivative of what I think students would pick. You'll also see an option to mark all other answers incorrect. So if you select that, anything that doesn't match the answer choices that I set as the correct answers, it has to match exactly one of those, or it's going to be scored as 0. You would use this option maybe if you were giving like a spelling test or a vocab test. Otherwise, leave it unchecked. That way, any non-matching answer it'll be still marked incorrect because it'll be pending review, but no score will be assigned and it'll remain blank until you're able to review that question and score it manually. Again, just like other questions, you can provide answer feedback, and you'd also would set the number of points for that question. All right, and the last question is going to be a paragraph type question. Copy that over. And again, Forms recognizes this as a paragraph type question that requires a longer response. And these are considered hand-graded items. There is the answer key option, but just like with file upload or date and time, all that you have the option to do is set the points and add answer feedback. You are going to have to review those manually. All right, and again, these question types, they're not scored. They're almost, it's like they're marked 0 until you manually override the points when you review the responses. So then once you have all the questions added, your next step is to distribute the quiz so that the students can take it. And before you get the quiz, though, to students, it's best to do a preview and just make sure that everything looks right. You can even take your own quiz to make sure it's configured correctly. But in terms of sending out the form, what not to do is grabbing this link right here and sending it. Because essentially what you would be doing would be giving the person access to edit your form. Now you know that is because the link ends in the word edit. All right. Anytime you're sending out a link for people to take a form, the link should end with the words view form. So the best way to do this would be to press the send button. And then you have the option to email this. So you can email it to all your students. My advice, in your Gmail, set up a contact group. So you could have a period 2 contact group and put all your kids in there. So I have one for principals. So instead of typing in 5 principals' names, I would just put in my group. You also have the option for a link. So this would give you a link that you could put on your learner management system. We have Schoology. You can also shorten it if you want something that looks a little bit nicer. And then you have options to share on social media, but we won't really get into that. I'm going to cancel out. Another option, this is pretty quick and simple. If you go ahead and press the preview button, this link is the link to your form. And again, you'll see that it ends in view form. All right, so now you're going to take a sample quiz so that I can show you how I would go about grading and returning it so that you can do the same. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow, and you'll see a link to take the sample quiz. I use this link as a bit.ly link. I love that link shortening service because it allows me to not only shorten the link, but then I can also customize the back end of it so it's a little bit more user-friendly. The link that you see, it is case sensitive, so just make sure that the MLP is capitalized. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes to take this. Either open up another tab, or you can enter the link on your phone and try it there. It doesn't matter what you get on this quiz. In fact, if you have time in the 2 minutes, take it twice. The first time, try your best. And the second time, go ahead and make an error or two or miss them all on purpose. And while you're doing that, I'll take a peek at the chat doc and I'll see if there's any questions that I need to answer. So I'm going to set this timer to 2 minutes. if you're having any trouble accessing the form through the link on the slideshow that's displaying right now, I also pasted a direct link into the chat document. I only see like one response in there right now, and I'm going to give you I'll give you another minute to just try to at least get one entry in there. Remember, if you're taking this for credit through my learning plan, you are going to need to respond to this form once in order to receive credit for today's session. All right, I've only seen a few people get to take this, but I did promise this webinar would be an hour, so I'm going to move on to the part where I show you how you would go about grading this. And how you would grade or review a quiz would just be to open up the form that you created it in. And you see that I have 5 responses here. 3 of them were mine. I kind of wanted to do a mock on that. And how you grade it is by clicking on the responses tab. Oh, good. We just got another one in there. So one feature of this is you'll see the results tab. Okay, this is the summary. This tells you what your average is, and this isn't accurate because it still needs review. And after you took the quiz, you should have been able to see your score, and you would have noted that next to the score it did say pending review. And I believe I put a confirmation message in there so that you could see that your grade was not final. So we don't want students getting worried or stressed out that they did poorly. This also tells me my frequently missed questions, which might not be missed. I just need to review. And it gives me a summary for each and also some really nice visuals. Another benefit is after the period's over, there's an option right here for accepting responses, and I'm just going to toggle that to the left now. So what that would do is that closes down the assessment. So I'm not deleting it, it's just not accepting responses. And the benefit of that is you can post a link to your in-class quiz or test ahead of time, but no one's going to be able to take the quiz until you turn that option back on. Likewise, if you have a student in one period and they share the link with a student in another period, students from a later class will not be able to view the questions ahead of time. So anyway, you can see the interface is pretty simple. You have the summary. There's also a question tab. And this is the feature that I think I like the most about Google Forms because it makes grading much more efficient. It helps you to be more consistent in how you award points. And it also groups similar responses together so that when you grade one item, it applies to all matching responses. And when you grade in this way, you're eliminating bias. So for starters, here, if you kind of look, I don't know who responded exactly. I don't know whose response is whose. So I'm not going to be too lenient or I'm not going to be too harsh on a student. And plus, students are not going to fall victim to what I like to call order bias. And by that, I mean their grade is not going to be impacted by the fact that their work was the first that I graded or the last that I graded. We don't like to admit this, but sometimes we do grade the first paper we look at too harshly, and sometimes the last paper that we grade, it doesn't get our full attention, and this is going to prevent that. And then the last tab is where you can grade student responses individually. If you set your quiz to limit students to one attempt, this is where you would be able to delete a response if you wanted them to be able to give it another try. So let's grade this. I'm going to go to the question tab. Because again, I think that's what is going to save me the most time. And I don't need to do anything with question 1 because that was a multiple choice question that was already auto-graded. To get to the next question, I can toggle over here the next question, or from the menu right here, I can select my question, whatever's easiest. So for this one, question 2 was a checkbox question. It required 2 answers. So even though I set the form to auto-grade this item, I do want to review this one for partial credit. Choice 2 and 4 were the acceptable responses. So I'm going to just scroll through the ones that were incorrect. And I'm going to see if the students chose one of those. And so I see 2 of the responses the students got, 2 students got this question completely correct. And I have 4 responses here where they chose option 2 and option 3. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is they missed this one. So it depends. Again, it depends on your mood, or it depends on your grading scale. I could say this whole answer is wrong because they had to get both, or I could go ahead and I could award partial credit for this question. When I go ahead and I change that up, I would just press save so that saves. And what's nice about that is I just corrected 4 students' papers by basically grading 1 time. I can also add individual feedback here. So I might want to let students know that they pick the gear. I think in this option 3 was the gear icon. But the gear icon is for settings. And then I save that. And then in their grade report, they would see that feedback. And again, I have to save. I'm seeing some people type in the chat document. People like the response chart. And yeah, partial credit, that is a nice feature. And again, a lot of these features weren't even available at this time last year. And that's what I like the most about Google. They're always responding to educators' needs and just improving the products so they're even more useful. All right, I don't need to go through any of the other responses because we don't have a lot here. So moving on to question 3. Here, I'm just looking that the answers were marked correctly. Response validation was the answer. And 2 people did type that in correctly. I had a response validation, that's correct, but they typed it in all caps. So to mark that correct, all I have to do is hit this green check and it gives credit. And I can hold off on pressing save until I've went through all of these. Manual review, 1 ungraded response. All right, so it doesn't look like there is, manual review is not the answer, so that one's going to be incorrect. And this one's not going to be correct. Neither is this one. And again, I have feedback already configured to let people know what response validation is. So again, when I'm done, go ahead and press save. And then last, here is question 4. This was requiring a lengthier response. So unfortunately, I'm probably not going to see identical answers, but if I did, that might kind of indicate plagiarism because everyone should kind of be putting something different here. And again, to grade this, notice there's no score in because I have to manually review it. So let's check these out. This looks good. Again, just by checking. Now, if I wanted to, I could give this partial credit. If there was an exceptional answer, I could give it extra credit. So if I wanted to let the student, know that I appreciated their effort and they really went above and beyond, you do have that option as well. I could make this one worth 11 instead of 10, and that's going to be up to you. I don't want to get into the extra credit debate here. This one's good. All right, and for independent learners, great. So you can see how easy it really is to grade this and how efficient it is to just grade it by question. Right, and then you would just save it when you're done. And then the final step is I'm going to re-release the scores to students, and I would do that in the summary tab. Now, the scores have already been released. As soon as you took this quiz and you submitted it, you got a score report, but now your grades have changed. So in order to release them, if I scroll down, I would go to release scores, and I could type a message if I wanted to, here's your final scores, and then send emails and release. If I wanted to, I could also, when I press this button, I could unselect students that I didn't want to get their score reports. Maybe I hadn't reviewed those students yet. Maybe they were absent that day. Okay, and as an alternative, you can also release scores on an individual basis. So like, let's say that, go to Matt's quiz. If he was absent that day and I already released all the other students, I could grade his quiz individually, and then I could just release his score and it would just go to him. And then I could also provide a little bit more feedback that's kind of like individual, like, please stay after school, or this is a really nice improvement over your last one. And I just do find them less time consuming to release them all at once. So now that I've released the scores, if you check your email, you should see an alert that your score was graded. But this is what the score report looks like. So again, it's really nice for the student. It shows them for each question how many points they got. In green, it highlights the correct answer, right? This question too, for me, this one was correct and this one was not. And they see what the correct answer was. So, they're not guessing. So they can kind of learn for themselves if they want. I gave them some individual feedback here so that they know that this is why this one was not right. Right? Not for response validation, I marked this correct for them. All right, so you can kind of see it's just nice for them. All right, so that brings us to the end of the webinar. I'm looking at our Q&A document right now, and I don't believe I'm seeing any questions in there. And by all means, if you're making one in the future, or you just need some additional resources, or you have a question, you can contact me. So as we go ahead and wrap up with the session, just like to remind you that all the resources from this session, including the recorded video, you'll be able to find at bit.ly/CCSD005. Again, that's the page where you'll find the webinar recording and the session resources. And if you want to learn some advanced features of forms, I recommend looking at Eric Kurtz's post on add-ons, as well as checking out a couple of the extensions listed under the resources section. The final step that you need to take in order to earn a certificate of attendance for participating in this webinar is to complete the course evaluation on mylearningplan.com. I know your time is valuable, so I want to thank you so very much for spending your time with me this afternoon. Hope you're coming away from this webinar with some new knowledge about different ways that you'd be able to use Google Forms to help you assess your students. If you have additional questions, do not hesitate to contact me at the email address that you're seeing on your screen. I hope you'll consider joining me again in the future for other EdTech webinars. Have an awesome rest of your day.